To put it lightly, World War II was a strange time for Walt Disney Animations. All major Disney animators were drafted for the war, leaving only the people fresh out of college or even high school to work on all of their projects. It's important to note that these animators weren't in the front line supporting the troops. No, they were actually making propaganda to help support the war efforts. In fact, there are many movies produced by Disney to help support the war, like The Making of a Nazi, an actual 10-minute Disney movie. A lot of the movies that came out during this time had scrapped together stories Disney animators had started making, but then new recruits had to interpret. The stories were always concluded awkwardly because the new visions of the new recruits didn't match up with the vision of an animation veteran. The best way I can think of describing it is, you know how the Star Wars prequels had vastly different ideas thanks to the clash of directors? Here it's kind of like a clash of animators. And I don't know why, I looked it up and there was nothing, but there was a huge focus on Spain and the Spanish culture during this era. As for my opinion of the time, I didn't really enjoy most of these films, which is kind of what I was expecting with the title alone. What I didn't expect, however, was there was actually a couple of gems hidden behind all the horribleness, like movies that I would actually see again, and even a movie I can almost recommend. I know, I'm shocked too. This spot goes to a movie that I absolutely despise. And I know I don't do rants on this channel often, but let me have this one. Saludos Amigos is an absolute disaster. I chose this one first because it was super short, only about 40 minutes. But the thing is, every single minute is bad. The characters are so unmemorable, it's unbelievable. I don't remember any character even being in the movie. One of them is Goofy, apparently. Yes, the Goofy, one of the most popular characters in media today. I should remember him, but his performance is so unfunny and upsetting. I legitimately would have rather seen a frog jump from stone to stone for 40 minutes. The Spanish aspect is handled so poorly. I didn't learn a single thing about this culture, and that's because the narrator will not stop telling you random facts. The way you learn about a culture is through interest. If you're interested in what's going on, you are much more likely to remember it. You don't walk into a museum where it's an empty room and the tour guide is just spitting facts at you, but that's exactly what this is. They don't try to get me invested, which leads me to not care about the movie at all. I get why people like Pocahontas or Home, but how does anyone enjoy this movie about Spanish culture where you're not learning anything about Spanish culture? And sure, you could put this in front of a baby and they'd be happy, but they would also be happy with something good. So there. Now, don't be mistaken, just because I have this movie at number 5 doesn't mean that it's not awful, but at least Fun and Fancy Free has some redeeming qualities. There's some merit behind its musical numbers, some of them are almost catchy and pleasant, plus there are some really interesting animation choices that make the movie's isolated moments almost bearable. But other than that, I found this movie exceedingly dull. The setting is always very one note and flat. Like, you know how in Snow White there's this magical forest with scary looking trees? In Pinocchio, there's an island where people are getting transported to salt mines and turning into donkeys. Both of these worlds make you want to learn more about them, and both of them are interesting to watch. Well, in this movie, there's a forest. A bland forest with nothing special about it. Snow White's best scenes was when the animators experimented with their surroundings. Here, there's no creativity being played into any of the settings. If it's a forest, that's it. If it's a desert, that's it. The stories themselves are unoriginal stupidities that are stretched out for the longest time possible. And then there's this weird live action framing device between a ventriloquist, his doll, a boy, and a girl. Like, what? Why would you need that? You don't need it. You can just use animation, whatever. It's an awful movie that I have no interest in revisiting. Next. Make Mine Music is a movie that exists. There's really not much to talk about here because the shorts are fine, the songs are fine, and the characters are fine. But the thing is, nothing here is worthwhile. There's nothing good that immediately comes to mind, which I think is a bad sign. It's just a super boring time killer that I don't think anyone can get enjoyment out of. Let's see here what to talk about. The baseball scene is, okay, I guess. This swan it is nicely animated. Yeah. Um that's it. I just saw this movie yesterday and that's all. that I can think of that happened. Out of all these movies, this one just felt the cheapest. A lot of these scenes are purposefully poorly animated, and the movie incorporates so many different styles that the movie becomes very hard to watch. Like, there's a short towards the beginning that uses still images for half of it, and then just abruptly cuts to regular animation. Honestly, I don't know what these people were thinking. Were they trying to make money? Because, that backfired. To me, the Three Caballeros will always be the improved version of Saludos Amigos. I can honestly say that I walked away with some knowledge of Spain's culture. Some knowledge of Spain's culture. And I think that there were a lot of great isolated moments. I really love the songs that they play whenever we're in the village. It gives off a celebratory vibe. I also really enjoy the color palette that feels very different from the others on this list. And then there's scenes that are so incredibly bonkers that you can't help but be invested. The energy this movie gives off is delightful. The problem here is that when the movie's not focusing on its culture, it's telling bland stories that are uncomfortable to watch. Like when Donald Duck has a romantic interest in a beautiful Latina girl and tries to fight for her love against, you know, an actual human. Or when we get to know the story of the boy who tried to capture a flying donkey. Or when there's random colors on the screen matching with the sound. None of these subplots are new, but the movie expects us to care because it takes up like half the runtime. Definitely not a good movie, but not a complete waste either. In my Golden Age video, I mentioned that The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad seemed like a bad movie, but honestly, I was pleasantly surprised with the first half. Mr. Toad has gone to jail because he has been wrongfully accused of a murder, so he tries to get out. Obviously. This half includes some excellent cartoony expressions and some really impressive designs that make me want to learn more about this world and its characters. I love Mr. Toad, which is really surprising because the older movies are really not known for their characters, but he has such a strong personality that's also able to pull back for some quieter, sweeter moments. I also really love law dramas, which is why Legally Blonde is a personal favorite, and this movie has a ton of it. But unfortunately, this only lasts for the first half. In the next half, we have The Adventures of Ichabod. I'm sorry, Mr. Toad, you will be missed. After this half opens with Ichabod Crane, which most of you know I love, it dips incredibly low. The story is just about a guy trying to get the girl and fighting someone to get her. And Ichabod Crane is a boring and wussy character to the point where I was kind of rooting for the villain. That should never happen. I felt completely bored unless a song was playing. The two they play are absolutely fantastic. I talked a lot about Ichabod Crane, but let me tell you about the Headless Horseman song. It is so catchy and fun that I feel like dancing. It's also got some great lyrics and shadow effects, especially from the antagonist. I like listening to a different song that doesn't feel like it came straight out of Broadway at all, which is a trapping that most Disney movies fall into. So even if the movie has some incredibly epic stuff and some not that, it averages out to good, something I never expected to find on this list. And yet, there's still one that beats it out. I'm going to give my number one spot to the film that impressed me most with its stories, its originality, and its songs, but above all, the movie that proved that Fantasia could have worked better than it did. Melody Time is a compilation of short stories all ranging from excellent to mediocre, but even the weaker ones had redeeming qualities. So let's pick apart every single plotline in this movie to quickly determine what works best about this film, because honestly, I have no idea how else to approach this. The first one is easily the weakest, if only because it follows the adventures of two people and two rabbits on a date ice skating. It's just kind of fluff that doesn't push any sort of narrative forward or has anything interesting. It just kind of exists. The song they play, though, is good. Next, we have Flight of the Bumblebee, played in the background of Flight of the Bumblebee. It's really amazing. And then the piano keys turn into sentient creatures, and it's a nice touch. And it's just an intense scene that is really bonkers and fun to watch. Next, we have my personal favorite, The Tale of Johnny Appleseed. I like this one a lot because it has a simple story with a simple message, has a likable character, and has a ridiculous plot that ends in a satisfying way. It's the story that is catered to what I like in fiction. But I think that anyone can get some level of enjoyment off of it because, objectively speaking, it's got a lot going for it. The backgrounds are gorgeous and make me remember why I love 2D animation so much. The jokes are actually funny and the characters are fun to watch. The story of Little Toot is next, and this one is fine. It's got some cool animation overall, but it's not really that good. But you know what is good? The Samba. I absolutely love this story, almost as much as I like Johnny Appleseed. But seriously, the color palette is gorgeous, the vibrant colors make me feel like I'm in Spain, and there's really some neat animation that cannot go unnoticed. And then there's the last one, which is just as good. The Samba and this Western tale, which doesn't have a name for some reason, are both crazy, and they both have a lot of funny moments, and they both have some cool animation. But I think why I like the Samba more is because this one is more stretched out. I think they could have cut some scenes to make this story absolutely perfect. So yeah, this is definitely my favorite of this era and something I might rewatch in the late future. Even though this era played out more or less how I expected, I admit a couple really surprised me. And now, with the wartime era finished, I can finally move on to the Silver Age, which includes another batch of classics, like Robin Hood, Cinderella, and Sword of the Stone. I remember not really liking these movies when I was younger, so we'll see how they hold up. But with some luck, I'll find something I like, I'm sure of it. Now, if you'll excuse me and Ratatouille have some unfinished business.